Spain's economy is booming. GDP is rising, unemployment is dropping, and foreign investment is pouring in. On the surface, it seems like a success story, one of resilience, recovery, and economic strength. But what if I told you that behind this impressive growth lies a hidden crisis? While the numbers may look good, they don't tell the full story. The benefits of Spain's economic resurgence haven't been shared equally. Instead, a deep and growing divide has formed between the wealthy and the working class, between thriving cities and struggling rural regions, between those who can afford a comfortable life and those who are falling further behind. So, is Spain truly winning, or is this so-called economic boom masking a much darker reality? In this video, we're uncovering the uncomfortable truth about Spain's rising income inequality and regional disparities, and why the prosperity you hear about isn't reaching everyone. Stay with me as we break down what's really happening beneath Spain's economic success. Spain's economic resurgence didn't happen overnight. A decade ago, the country was in a very different place. The 2008 financial crisis had devastated Spain, pushing unemployment to a staggering 26.9% by early 2013, one of the highest rates in Europe. The housing market collapsed, banks struggled to survive, and economic confidence hit rock bottom. But through a series of strategic reforms, foreign investment, and shifting economic dynamics, Spain managed to claw its way back. By 2014, signs of recovery began to emerge. Spain's government, under pressure from the European Union, implemented labor market reforms aimed at increasing flexibility and reducing hiring costs. These changes, while controversial, helped businesses expand and hire more workers. Between 2015 and 2019, Spain's GDP grew at an average rate of 3% per year, outpacing many of its European neighbors. Then came the pandemic. Like much of the world, Spain's economy took a massive hit, shrinking by 11% in 2020, one of the worst contractions among developed nations. But what's remarkable is how quickly it bounced back. Thanks to strong tourism, a booming services sector, and record-high foreign investment, Spain's GDP rebounded with 6.1% growth in 2021 and 5.5% in 2022. By 2023, the country's GDP surpassed pre-pandemic levels, growing at 2.5%, and in 2024, it exceeded expectations with a 3.2% rise, making Spain one of the fastest-growing economies in the Eurozone. Spain's economic resurgence has been impressive on paper, but when we look closer, it becomes clear that this growth has not benefited all Spaniards equally. While GDP is rising and unemployment has declined, the wealth gap continues to widen, leaving millions behind. The reality is that Spain is not just facing economic inequality. It's experiencing a growing divide between the rich and the working class, between younger generations and older ones, and between prosperous regions and struggling ones. In 2023, the top 1% of earners in Spain accounted for 12% of the nation's pre-tax income, while the bottom 50% collectively earned just 22%. This concentration of wealth at the top underscores a significant disparity in income distribution. The Gini index, a measure of income inequality where 0 represents perfect equality and 100 indicates maximum inequality, stood at 32.0 for Spain in 2023. While this reflects a slight improvement from previous years, it still positions Spain among the more unequal countries in the European Union. Educational attainment, traditionally a pathway to better earnings, has not shielded individuals from financial hardship. In 2023, 12.9% of Spaniards with higher education qualifications considered themselves to be at risk of poverty, an increase from 12.1% in 2022, and notably higher than the EU average of 9.4%. This trend suggests that even well-educated individuals are feeling the strains of economic disparity. Generational divides further exacerbate the wealth gap. Between 2001 and 2021, households led by individuals under 35 experienced a 19.8% decline in median income, whereas those headed by individuals over 74 saw a 40.5% increase. This stark contrast highlights the growing economic challenges faced by younger generations, including precarious employment and escalating housing costs. One of the biggest reasons behind Spain's rising inequality is stagnant wages. While businesses have grown, wages for the average worker have failed to keep up with the rising cost of living. In fact, between 2008 and 2023, real wages in Spain increased by only 1.6%, which is one of the lowest growth rates among OECD countries. At the same time, inflation and housing prices have soared, making everyday life increasingly unaffordable for the working and middle classes. For example, the median annual salary in Spain is around 28,360, but in major cities like Madrid and Barcelona, the average rent has increased by more than 50% over the last decade. This means that even people with stable jobs are struggling to afford basic necessities, let alone accumulate wealth. Another alarming aspect of Spain's inequality crisis is the growing economic gap between generations. Younger Spaniards are struggling far more than their parents and grandparents did at their age. Between 2001 and 2021, households led by people under 35 saw their median income fall by 19.8%, while households led by those over 74 saw their income increase by 40.5%. This is largely due to job precarity and housing affordability issues. Even as Spain's economy grows, many young Spaniards are locked out of stable, well-paying jobs, leading to financial insecurity, delayed independence, and even mass emigration. Many young Spaniards are stuck in temporary or low-paying jobs, unable to secure stable employment. Spain has long struggled with one of the highest youth unemployment rates in Europe, and the situation remains dire. As of 2024, Spain's youth unemployment rate, for ages 16 to 24, is around 27%, one of the worst in the EU, more than double the EU average of 14%. Even during economic growth, youth unemployment has never dropped below 20% in the last 2 decades. By comparison, Germany's youth unemployment rate is just 6%, while France stands at 16%. This means that nearly 1 in 3 young Spaniards looking for a job can't find one. At the same time, housing costs have skyrocketed, making it nearly impossible for younger generations to buy homes. In 2023, home ownership rates among Spaniards under 35 fell to just 36%, compared to 53% in the early 2000s. This situation has led to what some call the lost generation. Young people who are well-educated but unable to secure a stable financial future. Instead of benefiting from Spain's economic growth, they find themselves trapped in cycles of low wages and high living costs. Inequality in Spain isn't just about individuals, it's also about entire regions. While some areas are thriving, others are falling further behind. And this growing regional divide is creating 2 very different Spains. One of booming cities with strong economies, and another of struggling provinces, where opportunities are scarce. If we only look at cities like Madrid or Barcelona, Spain appears to be an economic powerhouse. But if we shift our focus to regions like Andalusia or Extremadura, the reality couldn't be more different. Take Madrid, for example. It boasts a GDP per capita of $38,000, the highest in Spain. Barcelona, the heart of Catalonia, isn't far behind at $34,000. These cities are buzzing with multinational corporations, high-paying jobs, and world-class infrastructure. Now compare that to Extremadura, where GDP per capita is just $19,000, nearly half that of Madrid. In Andalusia, Spain's most populous region, GDP per capita stands at $20,600, significantly below the national average. This isn't just a small gap, it's an economic chasm, and it's getting wider. The employment situation also mirrors this economic divide. Spain's national unemployment rate remains high, but it's not the same everywhere. In Madrid, the unemployment rate is just over 10%, relatively low by Spanish standards. But in Andalusia, it's 18.3%. This means that people living in struggling provinces have fewer job opportunities and lower wages, pushing many to leave their hometowns in search of work elsewhere. Spain's regional divide stems from key economic factors. Madrid, Catalonia, and the Basque Country thrive on industry and finance, attracting investment and high-paying jobs, while Andalusia and Extremadura remain dependent on low-wage agriculture. Foreign investment is highly concentrated, with Madrid receiving over 60%, while Castilla-La Mancha and Extremadura get less than 2% combined. Better infrastructure in wealthier regions fosters growth, while poorer areas lack modern transport networks. Education further widens the gap, with over 40% of Madrid and Catalonia's population holding higher degrees, compared to just 25% in Extremadura and Andalusia, limiting economic mobility. This divide means that opportunities are concentrated in just a few cities, forcing many young professionals to migrate to Madrid or Barcelona for work, driving up rents and worsening economic pressures in these urban hubs. Meanwhile, rural areas face population decline and economic stagnation, further exacerbating inequality across the country. It's not just a matter of high rents or expensive mortgages. Spain is dealing with a dual housing crisis, one where urban centers are becoming unaffordable while rural areas are emptying out, leaving behind abandoned homes and declining property values. In cities like Madrid, Barcelona, and Valencia, the cost of living has soared. Housing demand is outpacing supply, and property prices are spiraling out of control. Platforms like Airbnb have converted thousands of apartments into short-term rentals, reducing the number of long-term homes available to locals. In Madrid, the average rent has surged past $1,200 per month, up more than 50% in the last decade. In Barcelona, rents have increased by 60% since 2014, making it one of Europe's most expensive cities. Home prices in urban centers have risen by over 30% in just 5 years, making it nearly impossible for young professionals or middle-class families to buy a home. On the other side, Spain's rural areas face the opposite problem: a surplus of empty homes with no buyers. Over 3.4 million houses sit vacant, particularly in regions like Castilla y León, Galicia, and Aragon. Entire villages have been abandoned, with some offering homes for as little as $1 to attract residents. Unlike booming cities, property values in these areas are declining or stagnant, making real estate investments unappealing. This is the urban-rural paradox. One part of Spain has too many people and too little housing, while the other has too much housing and too few people. And so far, the country hasn't found a way to fix this imbalance. Spain's housing crisis isn't just a matter of affordability. It's creating long-term social and economic consequences where young Spaniards are stuck in a cycle of renting, unable to save for home ownership. Families are being pushed further from city centers, increasing commuting times and reducing their quality of life, and rural areas are falling into deeper decline, with fewer services and economic prospects. What's happening in Spain isn't just an economic imbalance. It's the emergence of a two-tier economy. On one side, we have wealthy elites, multinational corporations, and booming urban economies. On the other, we have struggling families, overworked young professionals, and declining rural regions. While Spain's economy is growing, the benefits are not being shared equally. If current trends continue, we could see an even deeper divide, where economic success is reserved for a privileged few while the majority of Spaniards face increasing financial hardship.